I have to thank the 92nd Street Y. I shouldn't say I have to thank them. I don't have to thank them. I choose to thank them. And as you just heard, 6 years ago, that's the last time we've done this at the 92nd Street Y. 6 years ago, we had our first such event. It was February 23rd, 2003. It was just before the war began in Iraq. And just after, and some of you may remember this, on February 15th, a worldwide demonstration against the war on one day, simultaneously, about 10 to 15 million people around the globe protesting against the war. So that was the context in which we had our reading here at the 92nd Street Y. And I mention that because we want the things that we do to have some connection with what is happening in the world outside. It's not just history, it's not just past, it's very present. And by the way, I want to thank a couple of the people who were responsible for organizing this today. Ruth Wiener of 7 Stories Press and Brenda Coughlin, who've been doing a lot of work for this, as well as Anthony Arnold. Yeah, and you know what happened at that first time when HarperCollins, my publisher, by then owned by Rupert Murdoch, I was very happy about that, and he was happy to have me, and HarperCollins, fortunately, in big organizations, the person at the very top very often doesn't know what's happening. I don't think Rupert and Murdoch knew that they were celebrating a millionth copy sold of A People's History, which was just as well, because he would have stormed the Y with, machine guns and artillery and his usual style. But when the idea first came out from HarperCollins, let's celebrate this occasion of all these copies sold of People's History, there's a question, well, how shall we celebrate it? And some people suggested, well, let's see, let's bring some historians on the stage to discuss history. I said, please, not that. And then I got this, what I think was a brilliant idea. I'm a very modest person, but this was a brilliant idea. I thought, well, let's get actors. Let's get actors to read actual, real documents from history. And no, not the kind of things that you have in traditional books of documents. When I was going to graduate school, I given a big fat book of documents, documents of American history. And what it consisted of the speeches of presidents, the laws passed by Congress, decisions of the Supreme Court. No, this was going to be a different set of documents. Well, there's going to be documents based on the idea of a people's history. It's going to be the words, the speeches, the memoirs, the songs, the poems, the things said by people who are not in power, working people, men and women, black people, Native Americans, prisoners, rebellious, mutinous soldiers, and we're going to have that kind of document. And it was in a historic event. We assembled a wonderful cast. We had James Earl Jones reading Frederick Douglass. We had Kurt Vonnegut reading Eugene Debs. Yeah. We had Marissa Tomei reading the words of a New England mill girl. Some of these things you will hear tonight read by other and also talented actors. We had Alice Walker reading Fannie Lou Hamer, the Mississippi sharecropper. It was quite a night. The Y remembers it, and I do. And so it was sometime after that, or roughly around that time, that Anthony Arnove and I decided, and along with Dan Simon of Seven Stories Press, decided to put together a book which was just a collection of documents, not like My People's History, which has snippets of quotations, dotting the book here and there, but to just use the full documents and put them all in one volume, which we called Voices of a People's History. And so we have this volume with 200 documents in it. And we've drawn from that for these events which have taken place around the country, events like tonight where we've had different casts of actors and artists reading some of these documents. And very often we would draw upon local people to read the documents. And I remember once in Western Massachusetts when we had a reading, we had a woman who had been jailed 13 times for civil disobedience reading a speech she gave to the judge on one of her jailings. So we produced that book, and we've had these events all around the country. And now we have this new book put out by Seven Stories Press, Young People's History of the United States. And there's sort of two aspects to this idea of a young people's history. Well, one is that we wanted to take My People's History, which is mostly used in colleges and in high schools too, but we had been approached by many teachers and parents asking if there was a people's history for younger people, for middle school people, for 10, 12-year-old people. And so Rebecca Steffoff undertook the job of adapting my book for young people. And you will see if you buy the book tonight, or even if you refuse to buy the book tonight, if you just look at the book as somebody else is buying it, you will see it's a very attractive book. And so it's one that's for younger people, and two, it also incorporates the words of some young people who themselves played a role in history. And when you think about it, how many times have you read, when you've read history of the United States, how many times have you read about the role of young people in history? And yet they've played a very important role. And I remember, coming across when I was reading about and writing about the Colorado coal strike of 1913-14, writing about Mother Jones, the 80-year-old organizer for the United Mine Workers. And I remember reading that Mother Jones had led a kind of march of children, children who'd worked in the mines, and she led a march of children through the countryside to the home of the President of the United States on Long Island, to Theodore Roosevelt. And it was a march against child labor. And these kids were carrying signs saying, "We want time to play." One of the documents you'll hear tonight has to do with child labor. And one of the documents you hear tonight, you'll hear from a young person, younger than we've ever had in one of our readings. So this is something new. But young people have played this remarkable role in the movements of our time, and you will also hear tonight the reminiscence of a young woman in Montgomery, Alabama, who refused to leave her front seat on the bus. The year before, Rosa Parks refused to do so and was arrested. And history is full of the participation of young people in important social movements. I'll have to tell you one more, which I just thought of. And that was because, I was teaching in the South and during the Civil Rights Movement, and this sort of stands out in my mind. I was in Albany, Georgia, with a mass demonstration of black people in Albany, Georgia. and they were arrested in large numbers. Like at one point, 1/3 of the entire black population of Albany, Georgia, was in prison. And so there was this scene of this long line of African Americans in Albany, Georgia, long line standing before the desk of the chief of police, who was booking them and taking down their names, And so then he looks for the next person in line, and he can't see the next person in line because the next person in line is below the level of the desk. And so a little boy, and chief of police is a little taken aback, but he goes through his routine. He says, "Well, what's your name, boy?" And the boy says, "Freedom." If any of you saw the photos of the demonstrations in the South in the Civil Rights Movement, you will always see in those demonstrations kids participating. So, yeah, we have to recognize the role of young people. You know that all that we do in writing these books and presenting these voices on stage, all of that, however far back it goes in our history, all of it is aimed towards the present. We don't believe in history for its own sake. We believe that history has to be something that deals with and helps us understand and helps us act upon what is going around us, the wars that are taking place, the concentration of wealth at the top, the prejudice against immigrants, the lack of health care for people, the starvation and sickness around the world. We want our history, whatever period it deals with and whatever the words are, we want them to be aimed at us. And we want them to provoke us and stimulate us and inspire us to participate in the social struggles of our time. That's our aim. And so